In 1939, when Germany occupied Czechoslovakia, they came into possession of large stockpiles of tanks that were excellent by the standards of the time. These vehicles played a vital part in the German Western Campaign of 1940 against the Allies, including many produced by the weapon manufacturer Škoda. Škoda was mainly involved in the production of artillery guns, but in the 1930s it was also involved in tank development. In 1942, Škoda officials approached the Germans with a plan for a new tank, designated T-25. It was a rather modern design, incorporating sloped armor and a gun with an automatic drum-loading mechanism. While the Germans showed interest in this proposal, ultimately it would be cancelled. Due to its short development life, it was mostly forgotten after the war, until relatively recently thanks to its appearance in online games. But before we get on to the T-25, a word from our sponsor, Call of War. Call of War is a free-to-play, browser-based online game where you take control of a country and then duel it out on the fields of World War II against other players. The game uses a lot of historically inspired units like tanks and other AFVs. You can crossplay on both mobile and PC, and using our exclusive link or the QR code, you can get gold and premium subscriptions when you get started on your strategic journey. After the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, Czechoslovakia became an independent state. Besides its independence, it also inherited two large military weapon manufacturers, the Škoda Steelworks from Pilsen and CKD from Prague. At the end of the 19th century, Škoda founded an armament department that specialized in the production of heavy fortresses and naval guns. Later on, it would also develop a series of field guns and howitzers. This company survived the fall of Austro-Hungary and the chaotic and turbulent times that engulfed the eastern and central parts of Europe in the 1920s. It even managed to preserve its place in the world as a famous weapon manufacturer. While initially not interested in the development of tanks, Škoda saw a potential new market and decided to join the new arms race. The first and obvious potential buyer of such vehicles would be the Czechoslovakian army. In the early 1930s, the company made several attempts to gain the army's attention by proposing a few different tankette designs, but they failed to garner any orders. By 1934, Škoda abandoned the development of any tankettes as they had proved to be ineffective as combat vehicles anyway, and instead focused on proper tanks. They finally got the Army's attention with the LTVZ-35 tank project. Despite having some issues, this design was deemed satisfactory by the Czechoslovakian Army, and a production order of over 400 vehicles was placed. In the late 30s, Škoda focused on designing a new series of experimental medium tanks. Luck was not on the Czechoslovakian side, however, as the rising power in Europe, Nazi Germany, sought to make territorial expansions into the region. The Germans were not only keen on acquiring new lands, but also wanted to get their hands on Czechoslovakian tank production facilities. Betrayed by their Western allies, the Czechoslovakian territory was occupied by Nazi Germany, who established the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia in March 1939. As a consequence of this occupation, any further tank development work at Škoda was temporarily halted, but not completely stopped. The major problem for Škoda was Germany's lack of interest in expanding the production of weapons to occupied countries in the early years of the war. A few exceptions to this rule were the Panzer 35 and 38T, which saw extensive use by the Germans in this period of the war. However, the Axis invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941 changed some things. Germany's own industry lacked the means to produce enough tanks to replace rising losses from the Eastern and North African fronts. Škoda saw this as a new business opportunity, and under its own initiative began work on a few new projects to help the occupying Nazis. The first potential order came from a rather unexpected customer. As nearly all German industrial capacity was directed towards supplying the German field army, the Waffen-SS was often left empty-handed. In 1941, Škoda presented a self-propelled gun project based on the T-21 and armed with a 10.5 cm howitzer to the Waffen-SS. A second project, the T-15, was conceived as a fast, light reconnaissance tank and was also presented. Although the SS was interested in the designs, nothing really came from this. During 1941, Škoda engineers had the opportunity to examine some captured Soviet T-34 and KV-1 models. As a result, they immediately began working on a brand new design with much better armor, mobility, and sufficient firepower. They hoped that they could finally convince the Germans to acquire more Czech-made tanks, who were at this point of the war desperate to find a solution to deal with these superior Soviet tanks. From this work, two similar designs would be born, the T-24 and T-25 tank projects. After examining these proposals, the Germans finally allowed Škoda to start working on these two vehicles at the beginning of 1942. However, they set up a couple criteria which had to be fulfilled too. including ease of production, minimal important resources used, and development time had to be as short as possible. And they needed to have a good balance of firepower, armor, and mobility. The mock-up had to be completed by July of 1942, and there had to be a working prototype ready for testing by April of 1943 at the latest. The first proposed project, designated as the T-24, was submitted in February of 1942. It was designed as an 18.5-ton medium tank armed with a 7.5-centimeter gun. The second proposal, the T-25, was presented to the Germans in July of 1942. The necessary technical documentation was ready in August 1942. The T-25 was a heavier vehicle at 23 tons and was meant to use a different 7.5-centimeter gun. Both of these designs were heavily influenced by the Soviet T-34 in regards to the sloping armor design and forward-mounted turret. After analyzing both designs, the T-25 appeared to be more promising, and so it was declared the winner. Work on the T-24 wooden mock-up was cancelled after the competition at the beginning of September 1942. There is enough information about the technical characteristics of the T-25 tank, but the exact appearance is somewhat unclear. There are two different drawings that show similar designs, but with some differences, mostly in the area of the turret shape. This should not be surprising. The T-25 project was still in its early development phase, so changes to some vehicle components may have occurred for various reasons. It is very important to note, however, that in the end the T-25 was only a paper project and it was never constructed or tested. So these numbers and information may have changed on a real prototype or later during production. The whole design was more or less conventional, with a separate frontal crew compartment and the engine in the rear. These were divided by an 8mm thick, fire-resistant armor plate. The T-25 suspension consisted of 6 70mm rubber rim road wheels, one front-mounted idler, and a rear-position drive sprocket per side. No return rollers were used, and the tracks were 460mm wide. Initial plans for the T-25 called for the use of an unspecified diesel engine. During the development, this was dropped in favor of a petrol one. The final decision was to use a 12-cylinder, 450 horsepower at 3,500 RPM air-cooled engine. Sources also mentioned the T-25 was to be powered by an additional 50 horsepower auxiliary engine to help during the ignition of the main engine. With a weight of 23 tons maximum, the theoretical top speed was 60 km per hour. The T-25 superstructure and turret were to be built using sloped armor plates likely inspired by the T-34. According to Škoda's own archives, the maximum armor thickness of this vehicle was 50 mm, while some sources mention this being 60. The vehicle's front armor was 50 mm thick, while the side armor ranged between 35 to 50. The roof and floor armor were the same 20 mm thickness. The front turret armor was 50 mm, and the sides and rear were 35. This vehicle was to be armed with Škoda's own experimental 7.5cm A18L55 gun. What is interesting about this armament is the proposed use of an automatic drum loading mechanism containing 5 rounds, with a maximum estimated rate of fire of around 15 rounds per minute. After firing each round, the spent case would be automatically ejected by compressed air. With a muzzle velocity of 900 meters per second, this gun could penetrate around 98 millimeters of armor at a distance of 1 kilometer. The ammunition load consisted of 60 rounds. The secondary armament would have consisted of 1 coaxial machine gun. Whether this vehicle was to have a hull-mounted machine gun is unclear, as the available drawings do not show anything. There is a possibility that it would be installed, and in that case, it would have been operated by the radio operator. It is equally possible that the radio operator would have used his own personal weapon to fire through the front viewport. The T-25 crew consisted of 4 members, with the radio operator and the driver located in the vehicle hull, while the commander and gunner were in the turret. The driver was seated on the right side of the hull, the radio operator on the left. The forward-mounted turret on the T-25 had one significant disadvantage, as it did not allow the installation of hull crew hatches. The 2 crew members had to enter their battle positions through the turret hatches. For observation of their surroundings, 4 vision ports were installed on the superstructure, with 2 on the front and 1 on both of the angled sides. The remaining crew members were located inside the turret. The gunner was positioned to the left of the main armament, with the commander being placed just beside him. The commander's cupola was equipped with a fully rotating periscope, but it is unknown if there would have been side viewports on the turret. The turret could be rotated by use of a hydroelectric or mechanical drive. For communication between the crew, especially the commander and the hull crew members, light signals and a telephone device were to be provided. The development of the T-25 continued until the end of the year, when, in December 1942, the German military lost all interest in it and ordered Škoda to stop any future work on it. Despite the hard work of Škoda workers, nothing besides plans, calculations, and wooden models were ever made. This begs the question, why was it rejected? Unfortunately, due to the lack of adequate documentation, we can only speculate. The most obvious is the introduction of the Panzer IV armed with the long 75mm gun, which could be built using existing production capacity. The T-25 would have entered production in late 1943 if all went without a hitch, but this is unacceptable for the Germans, who desperately needed more tanks. It is also questionable if the T-25's performance would have been adequate for late war standards. Škoda proposed two self-propelled designs based on the T-25, armed with a 10.5cm or 15cm howitzer, but as the whole project was abandoned, nothing came from it. While no T-25 was ever built, its main gun was actually constructed and tested by Škoda. With the cancellation of the T-25, the gun was likely stored and never used. After the war, work on this gun continued and was allegedly tested on one Tiger tank. That concludes our video about the T-25. What do you think of this forgotten Škoda tank project? Were the Germans right to cancel it? Before we end our video, we'd like to thank Call of War again for sponsoring our video. Check out their free-to-play World War II based online game. Don't forget to click the link in the description, choose your country, and find your way to victory. Share your opinions in the comments section. If you haven't done so already, we invite you to subscribe to stay updated on future content. If you'd like to contribute further, consider supporting us on Patreon or PayPal. Your contributions help us create more engaging videos. Until next time, stay focused and stay tuned.